Many parts of the base metal complex have seen gains recently. What's going on, and is it now too late to get in on the act? John Meyer joins us now from SP Angel. John, welcome. Is it too late, or we missed the boat on this one?
No, not at all. I think we're still getting started. People are beginning to understand the ramifications of the move from diesel and gasoline into electric vehicles. The technology is developing well. The sales of these vehicles is developing well. Yes, it's being encouraged by policy, government policies in China, which is the big area, and they really want to move more quickly than everyone else. And they have the communist government that will enable them to do that. So they are electrifying quickly. In fact, they already have more than 20 million e-bikes in China anyway, so the Chinese adopt the technology really fast. But we are, of course, moving that way as well, with policy changes over here, effectively banning diesels in city centres and stuff like that as that goes forwards. And electric vehicles are using a lot more copper. The charging infrastructure for those vehicles is going to use a lot more copper, and there's a whole range of other materials. The market has just cottoned on to the idea that a lot of the weight of an electric vehicle is in nickel. The batteries for these Teslas and other cars are heavy, not because of lithium, because actually lithium is a very light metal, and that's why lithium, I think, will always be used. But in fact, a lot of the battery componentry is made out of nickel, and that's quite a heavy metal. What we saw last week in LME Week were a number of presentations given by expert groups, Wood Mackenzie, CRU, and other very good expert, commodity forecasters on the supply-demand side, saying that actually there wasn't enough nickel to go around, and the nickel prices should do rather well. And the market has taken that to heart, and nickel did really well last week, copper as well, and in fact that lifted the base metal complex. And there's more than that going on. We're now seeing traders buying put options on $10,000 copper. We're nearly at $7,000. $4.5 million worth of put options have just been bought in this market. First time we've seen that for some years. So everybody's getting in on it, and certain traders are betting the prices could go very much higher.
You mentioned China. I'm hearing as well that perhaps some regions of China are now looking at scaling back on some aspects of steel production, for example. I guess this is going to have an upward shift on some base metal prices as well.
Well, China had their big anti-corruption purge, and now they're having their big clean-up, the anti-pollution drive. And so they're sending out inspectors from Beijing. These are not local inspectors, so they're not matey with anyone. And if they say you've got to cut the pollution and cut the production, they have to cut it. That combined with the anti-corruption drive, it means that these policies are now actually being enacted. Yes, the province of Hubei said they were going to cut capacity by 50%, but the key word here is capacity. They're actually not cutting their steel production very much, but they are closing a lot of bad quality capacity. So that will serve to clean up the pollution issues. So some of that capacity that was maybe working at 50% will be shut completely. Other furnaces, which are less polluting and more efficient, will carry on working at at actually better utilisation rates. So they are cleaning up their act, and that is important.
Yeah, okay. You've given the evidence there as well of this put options on copper at 10,000. I think copper currently trading at around about 68.17. I think it is at the trade at the moment. Let me just quickly work out for those that are in the markets in terms of some of the stocks to watch. Bearing in mind there's push up in some of these base metals. What are your favourite stocks at the moment in your corner of the market?
Well, we look at related companies, and small junior mining companies are very specific usually on the metals that they are focused on, and that's good, I think, from a management perspective and also from a shareholder perspective. SolGold is big in copper. It's a big stock, about £550 million market cap. It has huge liquidity. It has two discoveries in Ecuador. It has a very big discovery at Cascabel, which it's spending about $70 million drilling. It's very big. Will it work? Will it not work? We don't quite know yet. But if it does, it'll be a multi-billion-dollar project. And then recently, literally a week ago, they announced they had another discovery in the south of Ecuador. And this is more exciting in many respects because there's high-grade copper right at surface. And that, for us, is more immediately value-adding. And of course, the shares responded accordingly. They did rather well on that news, but I think there'll be much more to follow.
Well, I was going to say, if you look back at the share price, we've seen this big hump in the shares. And in fact, I think the peak was about May this year at 46. 26 or so, currently trading at 31. This little bit of steam that's been let out of this stock, any particular reason, or is this just a question of consolidating before another rise?
I think there must have been a bit of shorting going on in this. The way it turned round on the day of that news was dramatic. It was up 36% before lunchtime, over 10 million shares traded. So there was a lot going on in that share on the day.
Do you have an interest in the stock?
No. Well, we act as brokers to the company, so we do watch it very closely, and we've have followed every announcement for many, many years.
Yeah. In amongst some of the other companies I know you're watching, we spoke briefly before we went to air about Strategic Minerals, another company I know that you've been watching. What interest has this got in the base metal space?
Well, Strategic Minerals has announced it's going to acquire a copper mine. It's just running through the due diligence on that, so hopefully nothing bad comes out of that. And that means they could be going into copper production very quickly and actually for very little capital cost. So that is very good news. They're also exploring for nickel and cobalt in Australia, and they've got a tin project that they're drilling at the moment in Cornwall, which is good. So they're a bit more multidiscipline, but there's quite a lot going on there within the base metal complex, which is something we like.
Yeah, Ortac is another one I know that you've got the top of your mind at the moment.
Yeah, Ortac. Well, last week they talked about the consolidation of the gold project in the DRC. They're looking to develop 2 million ounces of 2 grams a tonne gold there. A week ago they came out with some very high grade gold numbers, which is exciting because then you get hopefully you get a small starter pit which gives you lots of cash flow to get going, which is a nice development. But the other bit that they might go for there is they have a stake in a project called Zamsort in Zambia, and that is a Zambian copper mine, which is something they could consolidate and drive. And there's a chap there called Nick von Schoending, and now that he's got free rein after a management reshuffle to push the company forwards, I think he'll actually make great progress with it.
Yeah, a company we've also spoken about before is Georgian Mining. I know a favourite of yours, another copper producer.
Well, Georgian is my favourite copper play at the moment. It has the discovery. There's a gold cap on the top, but there's a much larger copper resource underneath. We don't know how big that copper resource is yet, but we think it's going to be 5 million tonnes grading, somewhat more than 5 million tonnes actually. That's just the phase 2, maybe 20 to 30 million tonnes of grading 1% copper. That would be very nice. And they don't have to build their own plant. They have a joint venture partner, so they're 50-50 joint venture, and they can just truck the ore directly into the plant. And as and when that is finally agreed, I believe they've actually agreed on all the technical details of the joint venture and the processing. It just needs signature from the big man at the top. So that's very simple. Should be no need for any extra cash, and for cash flow to start relatively quickly. And as I say, they'll produce the gold to start with off the top of that deposit, so there's no pre-stripping or anything like that. And then they go into the copper after that. So hopefully the cash flow from the gold will pay for the drilling and the development of the copper project underneath. It's all open pit, certainly for the first few years. It's a small hill in the middle of Georgia. I'm not aware of any local objections or any particular problems like that, and I think it's a relatively straightforward and simple project.
That, of course, remains to be seen whether or not they can make a profit out of that. The gold price keeps on dropping. Gold's at a technically very important level at the moment. I don't know whether or not you've got any expectations on precious metals prices, but clearly that does have a material impact on that first stage of their mining profitability.
I never like to be particularly bullish on gold. It's a difficult market to forecast, but what we can see is that inflation is developing around the world, and gold prices tend to go better in a more inflationary environment. Now, I wouldn't say we're in a high inflationary environment. I think that's something over 4 or 5% per year, but certainly with the UK at 3% and the US at 2%, inflation is getting going. And with oil prices rising, I think there's certainly more inflation to come.
Yeah, OK, all right. To John, as ever, it's a pleasure. Thanks indeed for joining us, ending there on the price of gold. That's John Meyer from SP Angel with a look at this rise, mostly in those base metal prices and some of the stocks to watch that are involved in that base metal complex.